Welcome everyone to First Unitarian Church of Honolulu's weekly Pau Hana. This is a time when we gather together and learn more about some of the issues facing us as a community, or we just ask questions or we play games. It depends on my mood that week. And so today we're very excited because a lot has been in the news about some of the changes that have been made to some of the immigration policies in the US, and also some news about what's happening at the border we've seen between Mexico and the United States, but also raising questions of how immigration is impacting the lives of our neighbors and siblings here in Hawaii and on its many islands. So we are super excited to have with us one of the premier immigration lawyers in the state of Hawaii, Kevin Block, who is a friend of mine and a friend of the congregation's. So Kevin, welcome. Can you tell us really who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, TJ. Can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah, we got you fine.
Yeah, TJ just asked me to do this yesterday, so I have nothing prepared, and and I just can't say no to TJ. He walks the walk, and I've asked him to do some pretty incredible things, and he always said yes, like wear his priest collar and come to court and stare at the judge for me, and he did that and a few other things. So so I always say yes to him. So thanks for inviting me. It's an honor to be here with all of you. I think that the union or the collaboration between faith-based community and the small but powerful immigrant advocate community is really powerful. And I feel like with TJ and with Claire, who I see there, I feel like we're old soldiers, after the war. Like we lived through the resistance and we got close fighting, excuse my clumsy religious analogies, but like David and Goliath, like we fought against this huge monolithic Trump administration and all of its evil empire shenanigans, and here we are kind of almost on the other side of it. So yeah, I'm just I live on Maui. I've been practicing immigration law for 10 years, but in my own practice for 7 years. I used to work for the government as the director of the Maui County Immigrant Services Division, and then I went into private practice. And I'm also on the board of the Hawaii ACLU. And my mother was an immigrant. She was a refugee from Germany after World War II. And my father, his family were immigrants, Russian Jews who fled the Bolshevik Revolution. And my son is an immigrant. My partner and I have an adopted son who was an orphan that we became our foster son, and then we adopted him. And his wife is an immigrant. She has DACA. And my legal assistant has DACA. She was brought to Hawaii when she was 6 months old. And she's my right-hand man and one of the closest people in my life. So I'm surrounded by immigrants, and it's no accident that I became an immigration attorney. I feel like it's the crossroads of everything important about who we are as a country and and how we treat people. And I don't think there are immigrants. I think if we're walking on the face of the earth, we're where we belong. And my mother, who was a German immigrant, she was really into birds and how they migrate. And they fly. Some of these birds fly from Alaska to the jungles of South America, unfettered and without borders. And that's how humans used to travel around the earth until we built these borders. So I think it's a noble and important practice of law. And so that I love my job, and I look forward to it every day, but especially a little bit more now that we are kind of hopefully on the other side of the craziness of the last 4 years.
Yeah, can you say something about I'll just say it, the hopelessness of the prior 4 years, like the progression and what it felt like? Because I mean, we were friends almost the whole time of that administration. And and we both kind of watched it careen into the abyss. Can you say something about where you got to? I don't mean to just jump right into the feeling space, but I think it's good for people to hear what people very close to the situation were really feeling like. Can you just give us a sense of what it was like?
Well, I mean, on the negative side, you know, it was overwhelming. There was a lot of stuff that, you know, Claire can talk about this too, but there was a lot of stuff that came at us, you know, so fast that we just couldn't keep up with it. Like there was, because the administration had to use policy change as obstacles to bring about their goals rather than legislative change. There was a lot of them, and they were coming at us fast and furious, and they were coming at us before people even knew what the rules were or how to react to them, and it seemed like there was a deliberate attempt to undermine the immigration bar, because so many of our applications ended up being denied or delayed or subject to ridiculous amounts of vetting, and it made us look like we didn't know what we were doing. And I know for a fact, based on some of the research that I did, that the Attorney General in particular, I don't think the president was smart enough to focus his attack on us, but the Attorney General was, and it was, you know, they don't like the immigration bar because we stand up for folks, you know, that they felt shouldn't have any rights, and so it. But on the positive side, you know, there's this saying that I when I was younger, when I was in like 1985, I found out that I had HIV, and for a long time I was devastated by my reality. And then I heard this saying that it was a Chinese saying that said that no disease, short life; one disease, long life. And what it did for me, having HIV, is it helped me focus my resources, prioritize, decide what was important, and really sort of like go to battle. And that's what the Trump administration did for me. I had to, you know, everything superfluous and extra got stripped away from my law practice, and I just was in it like a fight to the death. And I was fighting every day, and I feel like I have a little bit of PTSD now, but because I'm hypervigilant still, like I'm still like, I don't trust them, and some of the stuff that I saw was so criminal and so unreasonable, and there was no excuse for it. Like one of the things that comes to mind is when the Attorney General announced that he was going to take away DACA, I didn't understand that. Like I could see some of the political upside, even though I didn't agree with it. I could see what the strategic value to them was. I mean, that's my job as a lawyer, is to understand the other side. And I could understand. I didn't agree with a lot of the things they did at first, but I could understand it. But that one I didn't understand. I didn't know what the political upside was for them. I didn't see what the strategic value was for them. It just seemed mean and vicious and cruel. And it caused so much pain that was, you know, disproportionate to any political gain that they got out of it. I don't know that they got that much mileage out of doing it, but we suffered. Like a lot of the people that I know have DACA. I did a huge number of, I've watched these kids on Maui grow up. Like a lot of them I've known since they were little kids, and now they're adults, and I know their kids, and I've gone to their high school graduations and their quinceañeras, and they were just so traumatized by that because they didn't know if they were going to be rounded up and deported, and they didn't know what their future, they didn't know if they should make plans for a month from now or a year from now. And I know what that's like, and it's no way to live. And I just, that was one of the worst, that was one of the low points for me, was when they took away the DACA protections. So anyways, I forgot what the question was, but I hope I answered it.
Yes, and actually 4 others that I was gonna. No, I'm just kidding. That's fine. Your Honor, the witness has lapsed into a narrative. Could I direct him to? We're gonna do lots of lawyer jokes today. That only actually like half the people on this will actually get. There's a lot of lawyers on the call. That's great, Kevin. And what I was asking was what it felt like, you know, and I think you really put your heart on it. And so I kind of asked you that question to ask you this one, which is what has changed for you in a relatively short amount of time? Is it just a feeling, or are there actual practical differences or changes you're experiencing? Because my experience was that so much of the bureaucracy, not in the bad way, the bureaucracy we need was just gutted and not replaced during the last administration. How much has gotten back up and running, and how is it running? How has it changed for you now?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I did know you were going to ask me about that because you told me that yesterday. So I thought about that a little bit. So one of the things that I noticed right away, you know, just like people who have experienced trauma, I sense things that are going on with immigration, as we all do as practitioners. I'm sure Claire does this too, but I sense how the ICE guys are behaving and how the USCIS guys are behaving and how the court is acting. And I feel the changing tide, or, you know, positively or negatively. And I've felt things cracking open a little bit. You know, it's, you know, when Trump took office, I knew it was going to be bad, but it took a little while for it to filter down to the agencies that deal with us. And so there was a period of, you know, waiting for it to happen. And I think we're in that period now. It's going to take a little while to undo some of this stuff, but some of the positive things, two of the positive things that I noticed right away is that that I have a lot of cases where the person has exhausted all of their, you know, remedies. They've lost in immigration court, they've lost at the BIA, they've lost at the Ninth Circuit, and they're waiting to be deported. And that became sort of unwittingly a practice area for me, because I became like the ICE whisperer. Like I knew how those guys, like they don't teach you this in law school, but I felt like I could go in there and stop them from deporting people. And that's what I was able to do. But it was getting really close, like literally in January and December, they were trying to deport some people that TJ knows and that have been basically on the chopping block for years now. Like, and they were just getting ready. Like they were like, pack your bags, start getting I was giving them, they want itineraries. Like they want to know that the person has a plane ticket already. And I was submitting those and just like scrambling around when the new administration made the moratorium on deportations, and it just literally stopped a person that was like a week away from leaving, and a few other people. So that's one of the things I noticed right away. But on the flip side of that, the ICE guys, you know, who I am really tuned into, because they're the ones at the very end who are going to make the decision. During the Trump administration, they were like sheepishly kind of like, oh God, this is weird that Trump is acting like this. And they're all from here. And so they were like, this isn't, they were trying to be a little bit more sort of like, I don't know, reasonable in response to Trump.
The sprinkler.
All right, hang on one second. Go ahead.
So then, now the opposite has happened. So the Biden administration is in power. There's a new important interim guidance that is given ICE some parameters that resemble the old ones, priorities for conserving resources. And now they're supposed to only try to deport people that fall into certain categories, and everybody else they have to give a justification now why they're going to deport that person. But I think now that has happened, now they feel like they're on the defensive, and in the dynamics of human, struggles and power struggles, now they're the cornered entity that feels, embattled and attacked, and so they're responding like, they're actually becoming a little bit more vicious than they have in the last couple years.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple little things that have happened. TPS, temporary protected status for Venezuela and Burma. I have some clients, I've already applied for it. And listen, there's some little things, but they're signs that the administration is being reasonable. This is going to sound really small, but they were kicking back applications that we spend hours and hours preparing for people that were victims of crimes like U visas, or victims of domestic violence, VAWA applications, or TPS applications, or asylum applications. People fled their home countries because they were going to get killed. They were kicking those back to us because we didn't write NA on every single one of the open lines on the application. Like, that was a rule under the Trump administration. You can't leave any question blank. And so if you spent 3 hours trying to figure out what persecuted class this person was in, and what, how to explain the abuse and persecution they suffered, and then you skipped over a question, you didn't write NA on the third time that they ask about how many children you have or whether you have an ex-wife, usually for years we would just leave those questions blank because there's no answer for that question, but they wanted us to write NA on every question. So that little rule has just been done away with. So it shows, even though it's a small thing, it shows that the Biden administration is just being reasonable and practical about these things. And that's huge and hopeful for us, because so much of this has just been unreasonable. Why would you send back an application for somebody whose life is in danger because they didn't write NA on every single line? It doesn't make sense.
So one of the things I know that is on some people's mind, and it's on mine, is I've seen reports and about upticks in crossings from the U.S.-Mexico border since the Biden administration, and in particular, seeing again a large number of unaccompanied minors. And I think that's one of the questions and concerns a lot of people have, is where are they coming from? Why are there so many, and what's going on with that? Oh, I'm sorry. There we go.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I think that I have a lot of asylum cases right here in Hawaii. I have cases of people from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. And I know the reasons why they came, and those reasons are still exist, but they've been exacerbated a little bit. Guatemala has some actual climate refugees. They've had some natural disasters, some volcanoes, and some drought, and some torrential rain following droughts, and their crops are failing, and so they're starving, and so they're leaving to look for, food for their families. And then there's still the destabilized governments that have been kind of a little bit more destabilized lately with the COVID pandemic, and there's continuing poverty. And so there's always an uptick of border crossings in the spring months. If you look at every year, it's a seasonal migration. I think there's probably, among migrants, there's probably some hope and optimism that they're not going to be stopped by the migrant protocols and have to live in a tent in Mexico for a year waiting for their number to be called. So there's probably a group that are coming for that reason. But I think the large majority of people are coming just like they always have, because they have to. And I think that, even though we're talking about geopolitical, macro, large questions, I think that the question of asylum is a very personal interior one, and it's very simple. You have to think about, if you haven't already, you have to think about what would cause you, any of us, to put your things in a backpack and leave your house and run for your life. You know, that is not an easy decision to make. And a lot of times, a lot of my clients have kids that they left, or husbands that they left, or wives that they left. So you're putting as much as you can fit into a bag. You're going to head out on a dangerous journey, and you're leaving your family behind, parts of your family behind. That's not, you don't do that because, you know, you've been following Biden's election on YouTube and you think you might have a better chance now. You do that because something is compelling you to make the, you know, the ultimate attempt to keep yourself alive. That's how desperate it is. Because a lot of my clients who are asylum applicants, they love where they're from, just like we all do, and they didn't want to leave. They felt like they had to. And those reasons are all still happening. I think the Biden administration is planning to invest money in those countries, and I believe that that might be a strategy that works. You know, I was thinking about, I went to Costa Rica a couple years back, and I don't ever have any, like, I don't hear about Costa Ricans coming to the border and crossing, and it's because
They love it.
they have a livable wage, they have, you know, safe schools, they have jobs, you know, and low unemployment, and so they don't, if things are even tolerable or manageable in a country, people won't leave. So I think that's kind of like what we need to look at. But yeah, but I think that the surge at the border is understandable. You know, we're in a migration crisis all over the world right now.
So I preached about this on Sunday, and one of the things I kind of said was there are camps that say, groups of people, I should say, you don't want to talk about camps migration. There are groups who will say, well, they knew it was illegal when they were coming. If they get caught and kicked out, it's their fault. Then there's another group that says, if they get here, they needed to be here, is the closest place they could get to that had some kind of hope. We should figure out a way for them to stay. And then I kind of said, and then there's more extreme views on that, and everything in between. So there's also what I think is, like, when it goes over that line of somewhat reasonableness, or what they think is reasonable about the illegality argument. On the other side of that is the kinds of nationalist policies that I think were being implemented to harm children in particular in the last administration, just as just a mean-spirited thing to do. And then on the other side, there are people who are like, migration just happens. The word immigration shouldn't even be a thing. And, you know, that borders are man-made, and so are the problems that are forcing migration. And this country has enough, more than enough, to care for these people. Where are you on the spectrum, Kev?
Well, I mean, my mother left Germany after World War II because she was starving, and this country took her in, and this country was a better place because she was here. She was a school nurse. She contributed money to all these different environmental and social causes. She paid her taxes. She raised her kids. So, you know, she became such a patriotic and proud American. I mean, it's ridiculous that we don't embrace these people that are coming here, because they would make us stronger. I believe that applying for asylum is not illegal. Presenting yourself at the border is legal. It's a legal right. And those folks have to apply for asylum, and there's a process. And the process works. Like, actual people who fear persecution, you know, the standard is fairly high, and those folks win. And if folks don't meet the standard, then they lose, but they get to try. That's the point. And the origins of asylum law are noble. It arose after World War II in the diaspora of people fleeing the effects of World War II, and it's a international right that when somebody presents themselves at the border, there's a per se presumption that things were bad enough to get them to do that. They're not just looking for free stuff. They're not eligible for free stuff. So I believe, I fall into the camp that believes that applying for asylum is legal. Presenting yourself at the border and asking for help is how it works, that there's a process that also works, and that we have enough capacity, room, jobs, land. We're not full, and that's who we are as a country. We've always been compassionate, and we welcome the folks that are fleeing persecution in other countries, and they come here, and in return for being welcomed, they become the best Americans.
Yeah. What you said. That. One of the questions some people have is really how this plays out in Hawaii. You mentioned people from the 3 Northern Triangle countries here, and some people are like, how are folks getting to Hawaii? And I know the answer, but I'd rather hear you explain some of that, because it's your show, not mine. Yeah.
Well, so, before the Trump administration of holding people in custody or separating children and holding them in custody, the process involves, when a person presents themselves and asks for asylum, the Department of Homeland Security engages in a brief sort of assessment of who they are and who they know here. And if they have family, friends, relatives who are already in the United States, they release them from custody because they would rather them not be sitting in a jail, especially now. And they let them go to live with their brother, cousin, mother or father, whoever their family link is. And then they give them a notice to appear in court. And I think I just recently read that something like 95% of those people show up for their first hearing. I mean, they're not skipping out because this is their chance. They want to go to court. And so they show up for court wherever they are. And so there's serial migration to places where there are already family members or community members from where they came from. And a lot of those pockets are here in Hawaii. And it makes sense because, on Hawaii Island, where I have a lot of Honduran clients, it's a natural fit. Like, they work in the coffee fields picking coffee. They don't stand out. They feel comfortable there. It's a climate like they're used to, and they have there's a group of them, and when people get caught and then released, they come there, and then they show up. They go to their court hearings in Honolulu, and then Maui has a Guatemalan community. Same thing. There was a group that came in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then from that has kind of exponentially sort of increased. And then when the volcanoes erupted and the crops failed, another little group of them came, and now they're here. And then on Hawaii Island, there's a group on the Hilo side, there's a little small group of folks from El Salvador also applying for asylum and also getting here the same way. You're muted.
So folks fly. They get on a plane and just fly here, right?
Yeah. So when they're released from custody, when they post a bond at whatever at Dili or whatever border facility they've been held at briefly, when they post their bond, they have to show up and report at the ICE office here within a certain amount of time. And yeah, they get on a plane and they come here, they show up. And you got to remember too, like, these are folks that are from authoritarian regimes. Like, when our government tells them to do something, they do it. They're not like about to suddenly at the age of 35 start, not obeying the law because where they're from, if you don't do what the government tells you, they kill you. So they're like, they come here and they're like on point with everything that they're supposed to do because that's just who they are. It's in their DNA. So I see a lot of information in the media. And one of the ones that just fries me is when they're like, oh, they're just going to come here and then they're not going to show up for their immigration hearings. Not true. Like they show. I have a client on Hawaii Island that has a 4-year-old daughter that when they rode from their daughter didn't get enough oxygen when she was being born, so she's 4, but she can't walk or talk or chew or eat solid food, and her mom carries her everywhere, and she carried her to get here, and they rode underneath on the bottom of a bus in the dark in like a space about this big all the way across Mexico, presented themselves at the border, got taken into custody, got released to a family member on Hawaii Island. And now she shows up for all of her court hearings, getting on the plane, going through TSA with no ID because ICE has taken her passport. So she has to explain to them without speaking in English who she is. And she gets on the plane during COVID and shows up for her ICE reports and her court hearings without fail. So if, that's just these folks would swim to immigration court if they had to. That's been my experience.
Yeah, it's really, I find it so, sometimes when you people who cast aspersions, you're just taking them out of their own backpack. They say, because they're the kind of person that wouldn't show up to something like that, and they don't know what they're talking about. Yeah, anyway, it gets me kind of vexed. It's hard to move on to the next question, but yeah, I mean, I met their dad, so it's a really, anyway, yeah, that's one of the things I think I think a lot of people just don't realize that there are as many people as there are from these parts of the world in Hawaii. Like maybe because in Oahu, we don't actually have the cultures enough together to make a culture, a neighborhood, a family. We don't see in schools cousins and uncles and aunts and things like that. And I feel like it's something we're missing, missing out on. It's more of something that is happening on some of the neighbor islands. But yeah. Now it was funny when you were listing all your family members that were in migration. It struck me that there's a pretty new member of your family that never was in migration, right? How it's like you became a grandfather recently, right?
Right. Yeah. So my partner and I adopted our foster kid, and then he got married, and then he had his first daughter on July 28th, 2016, my granddaughter Arisme, and then in May of last year during the pandemic lockdown, a week after my birthday, little Kevin was born. So they named him after me. So his name is Little Kevin, and he'll be turning a year now, coming up on, he's coming up on a year.
That's exciting. How does it feel?
I love it, man. Like Cesar became our foster kid when he was already a teenager. So I jumped the shark. Like I've changed a few diapers of my grandkids, but only for the novelty of it. But I didn't raise him as a kid. I got him when he was already a teenager. And now I just get to have grandkids, and my grandkids, they love me, and it's just super fun. I used to make fun of grandparents, and now I'm totally that dude. Like I will bust out my phone and show people pictures of my grandkids until they're like, okay, we get it. She's cute. You can stop now. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And this is going to sound totally cliche, but it is true. Like sometimes when I feel like tired by the fight or whatever, I think about them, and I want this world to be better for them. Like I want my granddaughter to have a better world where people aren't being so ridiculous. And that's why I fight harder, I think, because they're so young and helpless, and we're at such a crossroads. I mean, we could make this place like, we could enter into a new age of just understanding and tolerance and practical approaches to things. I don't think we should open borders, and I don't think we should, I think there's a practical answer that, that takes into account the fact that people have been here in Hawaii. The thing that really fries me, besides the stuff at the border, there are families that have grown up here, like my legal assistant. She came here when she was 6 months old. There's no practical, responsible reason why you would want to send her back to Guerrero, Mexico, where she doesn't even, like, she was an infant when she got here. It makes no sense at all. And it tears apart our communities when you rip people out of their places in our little, Maui outer island communities, and you tear them away, and then you leave half of them here, just like causing trauma and years of psychological damage to the kids that stay because they were born here and they're U.S. citizens, and then you take one of the parents and send them back to a place that they don't even remember. It just makes no sense. Like, I think if you're going to be in a party that, is constantly telling everybody how you support families and you're pro-family, then you got to stop tearing families apart. It doesn't make sense on any level. It's economically stupid. It damages kids, and it causes the leftover family members that were surviving before to now need public benefits. And that's their big fear, that they're going to have to give people free stuff. And now they have to, because they've left a family without a dad or a mom, and the kids are U.S. citizens. So they're going to stay here. And so, like, a lot of it, I think, I just look forward to some practical, common sense approach to these things that takes into account that, that there no human being is better than any other one.
And that raises a question I know a lot of people have, I don't know, every story is different. Everyone's got their own story, but one of the stories we have heard a few times is about the unaccompanied minors. And I think people don't really understand. There's a very visceral response in my own heart that's like, well, just give me 4 or 5. I can, like, handle it here, and I've got other members of the church who are like, sign me up. I'll just take 10, like, however. And this idea of it is just so wrong. But can you tell us some of how do minors come unaccompanied? I mean, some it's through losing both their parents. Some it's just they're only members of the family that are strong enough, right, to really make the journey. It's just the person who goes. But I know there's a lot of concern about that. And I don't want to keep answering my own question, but the other is that what we consider a minor in the United States is very different than what growing up in some of these countries is like. When you are 13 or 14, you're working, you're in it. You're not a minor. Like, you're a minor here. But what they've been through more than most people in this whole country will ever be through by the time they're 14. But anyway, Now I've answered some of my question, but can you say some about, I can't help it, the preacher comes out sometimes, but about what unaccompanied minors are doing and how that happens in your experience?
I mean, some of the young boys that I have as cases they were old enough in Guatemala to be recruited to be in gangs. And so mom doesn't need to leave because it's too dangerous for her. And she's not the one that they're trying to recruit, but 13 or 14-year-old brothers. I have 2 brothers that are like 13 and 15 now, but they were being actively recruited, and the gang was saying, yeah, you can join up with us, or you can die, or we can, and so she was just like, I can't go to the police with this. I don't know what to do. It's safer if you guys leave and try to go to the United States. I have a couple women cases, Guatemalan women, young unaccompanied minors, and they were going to be recruited by the gangs also, but it wasn't to be gang members. It was to be, gang members' girlfriends, or whatever you want to call it. And I have other young women that are not minors, but they're young women. They're in 18 to 22-year-old range that were fleeing domestic violence. And I have some young kids where one parent or a brother or uncle, older brother or an uncle, is already here. Mom stays home with the younger kids, and the kid who's 13, 14, or 15 that's at risk for gang recruitment gets sent and is unaccompanied at the border, but is actually coming to meet with a family member. So those are some of the scenarios. I mean, gang recruitment is not an easy asylum case to win because our asylum courts have decided that that's not a real thing. But from my own anecdotal, experience in speaking to my clients, it is a real thing. Like they don't want to join, and there's no alternative. And there's the gangs are the de facto government in the area where they're from. They've taken over the functions that a normal government would. They're the ones who give people money. They're the ones who tell people what to do, and these kids, they like to recruit young men, and some of these young men are just like, I don't want to join, and I don't want to die, so I'm gonna take my chances and leave.
Yeah, one of the questions that Kevin was talking about that he get asked, or the standard is there something happening? Are the police not enforcing a law that is that's causing you have to leave, which is just such a fiction because there are no police really there to enforce anything. And so it's like your answer is like, yeah, it's illegal to join a gang, but the cops aren't stopping it, and you're trying to make that case. They almost make it impossible on your end to argue and to fulfill that question, because if that's one of the bases, then they can just kick the application. So
yeah,
it's
that's exactly right. There's a weird disconnect because you're in the courtroom and everything's safe and everything's orderly, and the judges in immigration court can ask the clients questions, so they can prosecute your client or cross-examine your client, and they'll say, well, the first time that the gang members tried to recruit you, why didn't you go to the police? And my clients always say the same thing. They'll say, well, because I could actually endanger myself and my family more if I go to the police, because the police will tell the gang that I went to them to report them, and then there will be retribution. So we don't go to the police for things like that. And even though these judges are super intelligent and they've been doing this for years, they just can't wrap their heads around the fact that there are places in the world where you don't go to the police for things like that. I don't know what you do go to them for, but you don't go to them for help in those countries. And that makes perfect sense to me. And so that's one of the issues. There are two other issues here in Hawaii that I want to just mention in case people want to advocate with their Congress people or their representatives. These are two things that are actually happening right now in Hawaii that are just insane. So one of them is somebody at ICE has a contract with the people that make GPS systems that you wear on your ankle, because they are giving those things out like it's crazy, but they just want to put those on all of our clients that have been here for years, that have kids that aren't going to go anywhere. They're now wearing GPS ankle bracelets. And if the thing malfunctions or the battery doesn't charge, they got to fly back to Honolulu to have it checked or fixed or replaced. During COVID, it doesn't matter. My clients have been flying back and forth, endangering public health just so they can get the battery changed out on their GPS. And the whole thing is so stupid because this right here is a GPS. Like if you want to track somebody, just make them call on the phone or something. You don't got to strap a big, thick, chunky bracelet on their ankle. That's the stupidest thing ever. So that really irritates me. And then the other thing, sorry to get up on my soapbox.
I was only laughing because your grandkids are on your phone. So when you said I'm one of those crazy, you held it up and we were like, oh,
see.
Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, but I didn't mean to interrupt. The other thing that really gets you.
The other thing that gets me is there's this practice with our local ICE office that is contrary to all of our most deeply held principles of constitutional law, and that is that bond. When you ask somebody for a bond, it has to be related to their risk of flight or their danger to public safety. And when in criminal court, in state court, you have to do a bond study, and you have to explain to the judge, I want this bail to be $20,000 because this person's dangerous and they're going to leave. So we need to make the bond high so that they'll show up for court. Well, ICE has some kind of weird independent jurisdiction that's unreviewable, and there's no accountability for it and no oversight. And when you show up at ICE with your client at any step of the process, immigration court over, now they're going to appeal, BIA appeal over, now they're going to appeal to the Ninth Circuit appeal over. Every time there's a step up or a change in their immigration case, they raise their bail randomly and arbitrarily with no inquiry or assessment about, or no relationship or nexus between the amount and their risk to public safety or their flight risk. It's just basically like a thing like, oh, well, how much can you afford?
Yes.
So basically my clients are fleeing, countries where they've been extorted by gang members, and they're being extorted by the US government. And I know that sounds dramatic, but the government is saying to them, if you want to stay out of jail and fight your case and not be in the federal detention center when you're filing your appeals, you need to pay $10,000 bail. I had a dishwasher from Guatemala who probably makes $12 to $15 an hour have to pay a $10,000 bail. Of course, he didn't have to pay it. He could have chosen to not file his appeal, or he could have chosen to get put into custody in the federal detention center. So basically they tell them, if you want to stay out and stay with your family and your kids, you need to give us this much money. And it doubles every time they decide to exercise their right to due process and appeal at the next higher level. The bail can sometimes double. And I think that needs to be brought out and brought to the attention of our congressional representatives, because it's illegal and it's extortion. That's the end of my speech.
I'm glad. We have a tendency to write postcards at our church. You may think that sounds funny, but we don't mess around. We have sent
thousands. I know. That's why I tell, anytime I get in front of churches, and that's a lot, you'd be surprised. I always tell them the stuff that's irritating, because those folks will do stuff.
Yeah. That's it's very.
And somebody just asked if a really good question, has the ICE bond system been challenged in federal court? Not that I know of yet, but I think that's a great idea. I think I need to talk to the ACLU about that.
This is a good venue to do it. I mean, some of the federal judges in Hawaii are super nice. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
They got a good reputation. Now we've talked about all this, so I think it's a good time to ask a question someone has sent me I asked people to send me the questions kind of privately so I can kind of line them up and not distract you. But one person asked, do you have a spiritual practice that you follow to counteract so much of this, or to just rejuvenate you, or to otherwise keep you grounded? So
I'm so glad you asked that question. So I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic, and I'm very deeply and actively involved in a 12-step program, which, as part of that, I have a morning ritual that involves prayer, meditation, and yoga, and it happens every day. And I ask in my morning prayers what my higher power's will is for me and how I can best serve my fellow man. And I believe in that strongly. That's my strong spiritual practice. And I've recently become vegan on November 1st of this past year, and that has just kicked it up to the next level for me. Like, I feel lighter spiritually as a result of that. But I think that's a great question, because in order to be in this and not burn out and not have like a ruptured vein in my head, or just like some of the stuff, I can feel like veins starting to rupture. But you have to your spiritual game has to be on point every single day going into this. Like, I don't even go to work or start dealing with this stuff until I've had my 2 hours of morning spiritual rituals. So thanks for asking that question.
Yeah, I'm glad. It's yeah, I mean, when I was a lawyer, I never tell stories like this, but man, I mean, it was different because you're doing something that actually, I mean, I was helping people, but I was helping them get rich. Like you're helping people stay alive. It's a little different. But even what I was doing, like, it can lead to such unhealthiness. Just eat. It's like you're like a you're like a pain eater. You're just like it's just constantly taking it in and almost no outlet. That's why the percentage of lawyers who have chemical issues eventually is 3 times what it is in the normal population, because they find something to to take care of that. Yeah, I know a number of recovered lawyers of both varieties. They've stopped being lawyers or they've stopped drinking. But yeah, it's a huge thing.
Yeah, and my spiritual advisor, one of them is my sponsor, and when I have a particularly difficult or awful situation at work, his advice is always the same: more prayer and meditation. That is the solution. Doesn't always look like the problem. So I don't attack the issue harder and faster or in a different way. I actually turn away from it and turn to my spiritual practices, and then I have another look at it later after I've paused and done that for a little while.
That's a very that's a good lawyering approach also. If you just keep staring at the problem, you don't widen your scope to other cases or other avenues or other ways of arguing or tackling the problem, then you're never going to get anywhere. You're just going to be stuck in the knot, not in the wider web. So, yeah.
Yeah.
We're getting a little close on time. We've answered a lot of the things here. Is there anything we can do for you? Like, if you were like, what could this church of people who have this wily minister and do for me and my people? What is it that you'd imagine? And we got some friends, we got some people we get involved and stuff, but what is there anything that comes to mind as something that you could use the most help with your folks? I mean, if it's the 2 things you mentioned, like figure out a way to stop bond, the federal bond, and also figure out.
I mean, Claire and I talk about this a lot. I didn't even begin to talk about USCIS, but that is an agency that's out of control and lacks oversight and lacks accountability. And I think there needs to be some involvement with our local representatives, because they're a federal agency, but they live here in this island. And during the COVID epidemic, the pandemic, they were constantly asking my clients to fly over there, and putting everybody at risk or lose their immigration benefit that they were applying for. And they're the ones that are in charge of giving out green cards and citizenship to people. And they've just been atrocious and continue to be. And it's because they don't have any kind of accountability. So I think that, I think that maybe Claire and the HALA chapter might organize 1 or 2 or 3 priorities for our congressional representatives. I think we should take advantage of this moment that we're in right now when things can actually happen, and keep the pressure on to make some changes, and not just sort of like collapse in exhaustion just because we're not under the Trump administration anymore, but we can actually make things better. So accountability for USCIS, and then accountability for the ICE guys to not request, threaten people with jail or come up with money, not to extort people, and not to put those stupid GPS collars on people. But I think that I'm not used to getting asked. I'm not used to getting asked that question, and so I want to think about my answer a little bit more and get back to you with that, TJ, and then you can share it with the folks.
Okay. We will take it seriously if you have some things to show up for or do. I know Susanne's on the call. She's with the legal clinic and, is a member of our church also. So I just want to say, thank you in many ways for your time today, for the work that you do. You're an inspiration to me, and I think to a lot of people on this call. And you may not always feel like you are, but you should know that you really are. So,
well, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an honor to I wish I could see everybody, but it's been an honor.
You want to do it now? We'll do it. There we go. Here's everyone. If you go to gallery view, you can see everyone, Kev.
Oh, okay. Hi, you guys. This is my fancy shirt, but I'm wearing the same sweatpants that I've worn for a year, just so you know, down underneath here.
We're going to be sure that definitely makes it into the edited final cut of the...
You can cut that part out, man.
Nah.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to see all of you, and thanks for listening. I hope it was worth your time.
I think we all learned a lot. Thank you. Yeah. Let's hear it for Kevin.
That was great.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Yay, Kevin!
And really, let's hear it for Claire also. Claire's on the call. Where is Claire? Oh, did she go? She left.
Hi, Claire. No, she's here.
Oh, there she is. Claire.
Hi.
Thank you,
Claire's
Kevin
doing
and
this
Claire.
one too. And
Well done, bravo.
For hosting this. It's always great to be with a group of people who care about the same things that we care about. So thank you for that. And just one thing, when the question was about what can be done to support, so there are.
oh, sorry.
I'm okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I tried to spotlight you and I accidentally muted you.
Okay. No, I was just going to say, so, support for the legal clinic. I'm on the board of the legal clinic. Is something that's doing some really tremendous advocacy as far in addition to really important work one-on-one with people in individual cases. So it's a great balance of, changing individual lives, but also working on systemic change. There's also Hawaii Immigrant Justice Center at Legal Aid, which is a place that people can support. And also there's an immigration and refugee clinic at the law school, if anyone's connected to the law school. So there's, these projects did not exist very long ago. They're all relatively new, and they're doing really, really good work, and they really help Kevin and I and others who are in private practice, but also doing a lot of advocacy to to help affect some of the systemic change that it's hard for us as individuals to do. So just a plug for those groups. And again, thanks to all of you for your interest, and thank you to my brother Kevin for everything that he does always.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. I'm going to release you to your late dinners or your cocktails or whatever you're going to get up to this evening. There you go. I'm going to edit this and get it posted so people can see it tomorrow. But have a wonderful week, everyone. Kevin, mahalo. And
Thanks, you guys.
yeah, have a great night, everyone. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Mahalo.